What if I told you that Elon Musk and Donald Trump, two of the most powerful men on Earth, might just be players in a game controlled by someone else? Hidden dynasties worth trillions quietly decide elections, tech revolutions and wars without ever stepping into the spotlight. Stay until the end, because we'll uncover the one family whose empire reaches from Wall Street to the White House and even into space. The Koch Empire, turning oil into political power. They built an empire from oil, but their real fuel was politics. The Koch family, heirs to one of America's largest private companies, turned industrial wealth into a system of quiet domination that reshaped the modern United States. Their company, Koch Industries, valued at over $100 billion, produces everything from crude oil and chemicals to paper, fertilizer, and even electronic components. On paper, it's an energy conglomerate. In reality, it's a political machine disguised as business, a network that stretches from refineries in Texas to think tanks in Washington. The story begins with Fred Koch, an engineer who made his first fortune helping build oil refineries in the Soviet Union during the 1930s. But it was his sons, Charles and David Koch, who weaponized that fortune into ideology. In the 1970s, they realized that raw money could buy more than influence. It could rewrite the rules of democracy itself. They poured billions into foundations, policy institutes, and university programs designed to promote free market principles. These institutions, like the Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, weren't just academic. They were factories of persuasion, turning economic theory into political doctrine. By the 2000s, the Koch network had evolved into a parallel political infrastructure. Through organizations like Americans for Prosperity, they funded over $500 million per election cycle, supporting candidates who pledged to cut environmental regulations, lower taxes for corporations, and weakened labor unions. Their influence shaped everything from the Clean Air Act rollbacks to the defunding of renewable energy initiatives. When a new law threatened fossil fuel profits, the Koch machine didn't just lobby, they rewrote the narrative, presenting deregulation as freedom. Koch Industries quietly profited from nearly every deregulated market it touched. The company's refineries in Minnesota and Alaska, chemical plants under Flint Hills Resources, and paper brands like Brawny and Dixie turned into cash engines feeding back into politics. While most Americans saw two-party elections, the Kochs saw an open marketplace where policies could be bought, traded, and shaped. Their influence reached deep into the Republican Party, but even beyond it, funding moderate Democrats and libertarian causes when necessary. The family's reach wasn't about loyalty, it was about leverage. Behind closed doors, Charles Koch promoted a philosophy he called market-based management, a corporate ideology that merged business efficiency with social control. Every employee, every politician they supported was expected to operate like a node in a vast feedback system. That system didn't just make money, it produced obedience. Critics have called it the privatization of democracy, and they're not wrong. Today, even after David Koch's death, the dynasty remains active. Their political arm continues to back judicial appointments, fund media outlets, and influence tax codes that favor the ultra-rich. Their fingerprints are on America's energy grid, its universities, and even its Supreme Court rulings. The Koch empire proved one thing that every dynasty after them learned to copy: wealth means little without control over law. In the age of oil, they mastered regulation. In the age of information, their successors learned to master perception. What do you think? Can a democracy survive when billionaires can rewrite the rules that govern it? The Mars and Walton dynasties, feeding and employing the world. They don't run countries, but they run your kitchen, your paycheck, and the rhythm of your everyday life. The Mars and Walton families represent the quiet, omnipresent power that doesn't need elections or armies to rule. Their influence hides behind candy wrappers and checkout counters, woven so tightly into daily routines that most people never realize they're serving dynasties. The Mars family, owners of Mars Inc., control a privately held empire worth over $140 billion, with annual revenue exceeding $45 billion. What began in 1911 as a small candy kitchen in Tacoma, Washington, evolved into one of the largest food conglomerates on Earth. Their portfolio extends far beyond M&Ms and Snickers. It spans pet food brands like Pedigree and Whiskas, gum labels like Orbit and Extra, and even human food giants like Ben's Original and Dolmio. Every product line taps into a basic instinct: pleasure, reward, comfort, and monetizes it. The family's fifth generation now runs the company in complete secrecy, maintaining a tradition of privacy so extreme that no Mars heir has ever given a public interview. Behind the sweetness lies strategy. The Mars empire perfected emotional branding using neuroscience and psychology to trigger dopamine responses through taste, color, and advertising cues. Their R&D budget reportedly exceeds $2 billion annually, focused on flavor manipulation, shelf visibility, and consumer addiction studies. They control not just what people eat, but how they feel about eating it, feeding both appetite and identity. That quiet manipulation has earned them comparisons to behavioral engineers rather than confectioners. If Mars shaped how the world eats, the Waltons, heirs to the Walmart fortune, shaped how the world buys. With a combined family net worth exceeding $250 billion, they own more wealth than 40% of Americans combined. Walmart, valued around $600 billion, operates over 10,000 stores globally and employs more than 2.1 million people, making it the world's largest private employer. Their strategy is simple yet devastatingly effective: low prices at any cost. To maintain dominance, Walmart pushes global suppliers to cut production costs, often reshaping entire industries to meet its demands. From apparel to electronics, the company's purchasing contracts dictate factory locations, labor conditions, and even currency flows. Economists call it the Walmart effect. When the brand enters a region, competitors collapse, wages fall, and small businesses vanish, replaced by one blue sign that controls an entire town's economy. Inside their Arkansas headquarters, decisions about supply chains can influence GDP shifts in developing nations. The Walton family exerts control not through politics, but through dependency. Every discount, every store expansion reinforces an unspoken truth: Walmart doesn't need to govern, it only needs to supply. Together, the Mars and Walton dynasties built the invisible empire of consumption. One feeds the body, the other feeds the habit. They turned everyday necessity into a global system of economic obedience, proving that in the modern world, true power isn't about who commands nations, but who decides what you eat, where you shop, and how much you're willing to pay for convenience. The Hermès and L'Oreal families manufacturing desire and class. They don't sell products, they sell emotions, identity, and status. The Hermès and Bettencourt families discovered something more profitable than oil or steel: human desire. Where other dynasties dominate through politics or industry, these families rule through the psychology of aspiration. They built empires not on necessity, but on the illusion of perfection, controlling what people dream of owning and who they dream of becoming. The Hermès family, guardians of France's most exclusive fashion house, turned scarcity into religion. Founded in 1837 as a saddle workshop, Hermès has grown into a luxury fortress valued at more than $200 billion, still majority owned by the same bloodline. Their most famous symbol, the Birkin bag, isn't just an accessory, it's a social passport. Each one, handmade from crocodile or calf skin, can cost anywhere from $10,000 to over $500,000. Waiting lists stretch years. Some buyers are rejected entirely, not because they can't afford it, but because Hermès chooses who is worthy of owning one. That curated exclusivity is what keeps the brand powerful, limiting access not to protect quality, but to preserve hierarchy. Inside the Hermès flagship store on Rue de Faubourg Saint-Honoré in Paris, clients don't just shop, they perform. Every purchase signals class, lineage, and entry into a silent global network of elites. Even the packaging, orange boxes, silk ribbons, is engineered to evoke ritual. In an age obsessed with visibility, Hermès mastered invisibility, selling wealth so subtle it whispers instead of screams. If Hermès controls status, L'Oréal, led by the Bettencourt family, controls beauty itself. With a market value surpassing $250 billion, it is the largest cosmetics company on Earth, owning brands like Lancôme, Maybelline, Garnier, and Yves Saint Laurent Beauty. Its empire spans 150 countries, touching nearly every face that looks in a mirror. L'Oréal's power lies not in products, but persuasion. The ability to redefine what beauty means across generations and cultures. Their advertising doesn't sell lipstick, it sells self-worth. It teaches consumers that perfection is possible, but never permanent, ensuring endless demand. The Betancourts understood that the most valuable resource in the modern world isn't oil or data, it's insecurity. Through strategic sponsorships, social media partnerships, and psychological marketing, they created a cycle where beauty is both aspiration and addiction. Every time a new flaw is defined, wrinkles, pores, uneven tones, a new billion-dollar solution follows. The labs spend over $1 billion annually on R&D, not just to innovate, but to anticipate desires before consumers even feel them. Together, Hermès and L'Oreal engineered a system where luxury is obedience disguised as choice. One dictates who belongs to the elite, the other dictates how the rest of the world tries to catch up. Their products are different, but their philosophy is identical. Make people believe that what you sell, they are incomplete. And so, in the quiet rooms of Paris and corporate towers of Clichy, two families turn psychology into power. They prove that the deepest form of control isn't through law or finance, it's through longing. Because once desire becomes a business, the entire world becomes its marketplace. The Porsche and BMW quant families, industrial power disguised as innovation. They built their fortunes from engines of war and turned them into symbols of luxury. The Porsche Piech and BMW Quant families stand as Europe's most powerful industrial dynasties, controlling car empires that define German precision and global prestige. To the world, their names evoke elegance, engineering, and progress. But beneath the gleam of chrome and carbon fiber lies a history of profit, politics, and power stretching from Nazi factories to billion-dollar boardrooms. The Porsche Piech family, heirs to engineer Ferdinand Porsche, created one of the world's largest automotive networks through the Volkswagen Group, which today owns Porsche, Audi, Lamborghini, Bentley, and Bugatti. The family controls more than 50% of Volkswagen's voting rights, giving them immense authority over an empire valued at over $90 billion. Each brand serves a different class of influence, from the working man's Volkswagen to the billionaire's Bugatti. Together they represent not just cars, but the architecture of aspiration. The family's reach extends into the very DNA of European industry. Through Porsche Automobile Holding SE, they shape policy, research, and the direction of what Europe calls clean mobility. Yet the irony is unmistakable. While governments push electric vehicles as symbols of sustainability, the family profits from both fossil fuel legacies and electric revolutions. Even the Porsche Taycan, the brand's first all-electric model priced around $200,000, relies on lithium mined under environmentally controversial conditions. For the Porsches, green innovation is not an ideology, it's an evolution of monopoly. Across Bavaria, their rivals, the Quant family, majority shareholders of BMW, operate with a similar blend of legacy and leverage. Descended from industrialist Günther Quandt, who amassed wealth during World War II by supplying arms and batteries to the Nazi regime, the family rebranded itself after the war into the epitome of modern refinement. Today they control nearly 47% of BMW Group, which includes Mini and Rolls-Royce motor cars, an empire worth more than $70 billion. The Quant's influence extends far beyond Munich's factories. They sit on boards of financial institutions, energy conglomerates, and even media outlets that shape Europe's corporate narrative. BMW's vast lobbying apparatus ensures that emission standards and subsidy policies align with the company's bottom line. When the European Union discusses climate goals, the Quants are often already 2 steps ahead, positioning BMW to benefit from the very regulations meant to constrain it. Their flagship models, from the BMW 7 Series to the Rolls-Royce Phantom, sell not just performance but philosophy. Each represents a vision of success. A promise that wealth can be moral if wrapped in sustainability and innovation. But behind every sleek electric sedan lies a story of consolidation, mergers, influence, and strategic ownership that transformed these once local manufacturers into pillars of European identity. For Elon Musk and Tesla, the real competition isn't in horsepower, it's in heritage. The Porsche Piech and Quant dynasties have ruled European roads for nearly a century, outlasting wars, recessions, and revolutions. They don't chase innovation, they define its limits. In the modern automotive era, where every car is a data center on wheels, these families remain the gatekeepers of how far the world can truly drive. The Hoffmann-La Roche and Dutch semiconductor dynasties, controlling medicine and technology. They control what humanity heals and what humanity builds. The Hoffmann-La Roche and Dutch semiconductor dynasties operate on opposite sides of industry, yet both wield the same quiet power, the ability to decide who advances, who waits, and who falls behind. Between them lies the blueprint of modern civilization, one family governing medicine, the other governing technology. The Hoffmann-La Roche family, founders of the Swiss pharmaceutical giant Roche Holding AG, command an empire worth over $300 billion. What began in 1896 as a chemical laboratory in Basel has evolved into one of the most influential corporations in global healthcare. Roche controls a vast portfolio of cancer treatments, diagnostics, and life-saving drugs that reach more than 150 countries. Their medicines, Herceptin, Avastin, and Tamiflu, generate tens of billions each year, shaping the cost and availability of critical therapies. But their true strength isn't found in any pill or vaccine. It lies in ownership of patents, research pipelines, and regulatory influence that turns sickness itself into a business model. Every molecule in Roche's catalog represents a calculated equation: human need versus market potential. Through decades of lobbying and exclusive patents, the family helped establish the global framework that allows pharmaceutical giants to set their own prices. During pandemics and health crises, Roche's technologies often become indispensable. Monopolies disguised as miracles. Their diagnostics division, valued at over $60 billion, supplies hospitals worldwide with machines that test for everything from viruses to genetic disorders. Yet these innovations also reinforce dependence. When a nation's hospitals rely on Roche's systems, its health policies inevitably follow. While the Hoffmann-La Roche dynasty built a kingdom from biology, another family across the North Sea shapes the digital bloodstream of the modern world. In the Netherlands, a small group of industrial families, descendants of the Van den Brink, Van der Poel and Van den Berg lineages, quietly oversee ASML, holding NV, the sole manufacturer of EUV lithography machines. Each machine, priced around $200 million, is a cathedral of precision engineering, capable of etching microscopic circuits onto silicon wafers thinner than a strand of hair. Without ASML's technology, there would be no iPhones, no Teslas, no NVIDIA GPUs, and no artificial intelligence. Puzzle Government's annual revenue surpasses $30 billion, yet the company produces fewer than 100 of these machines per year. This scarcity isn't inefficiency, it's strategy. By limiting access to its EUV systems, the Dutch semiconductor dynasties control the pace of technological progress itself. The United States, China, and Europe all depend on their supply chain, turning the Netherlands, a country of 17 million people, into the quiet referee of global innovation. In 2023, a single export restriction by ASML sent shockwaves through Wall Street and Beijing alike, proving that in the digital age, power isn't held by armies, but by those who build the tools that make invention possible. Together, Roche and ASML define the new aristocracy of progress. One controls the molecules that sustain life, the other controls the chips that define it. Between patents and photolithography, these dynasties reveal a truth that few dare to confront. Modern civilization no longer belongs to governments, but to the families who decide what humanity is allowed to create. The Rockefeller dynasty, the system above all systems. They didn't just play the game, they built the board. The Rockefeller family stands as the blueprint for every modern dynasty that came after them. Long before Silicon Valley, before the Kochs or the Waltons, they mastered the one skill that turns fortune into eternity, converting money into institutions. The family story begins with John D. Rockefeller, a devout Baptist who transformed oil into a religion of profit. By the time he founded Standard Oil in 1870, he controlled nearly 90% of America's oil production, making him the first man in history worth over $400 billion in today's money. When Standard Oil was forcibly broken up by antitrust laws in 1911, the world thought the empire had fallen. Instead, it multiplied. The pieces of his company, Exxon, Chevron, Conoco, BP, and Mobil, became global titans, each still echoing the Rockefeller DNA. Every loss was actually a replication of power. The family's wealth didn't evaporate, it diversified, flowing through foundations, trusts, and interlocking directorships that blurred the line between philanthropy and control. In 1913, they founded the Rockefeller Foundation, one of the most influential organizations in modern history. On paper, it funded medicine, education, and science. In reality, it shaped the intellectual infrastructure of the 20th century. It financed universities like Harvard, Columbia, and Chicago, seeded medical research that led to the creation of Big Pharma, and funded social programs that defined global health policy. By the mid-20th century, Rockefeller grants were behind everything, from the World Health Organization to the United Nations' first headquarters in New York, built on land the family donated. They weren't just influencing governments, they were writing the blueprints for them. Their reach expanded further through Chase Manhattan Bank, founded and chaired by David Rockefeller, the family's most powerful modern patriarch. Under his leadership, Chase merged with JP Morgan to become JP Morgan Chase, a financial colossus managing trillions of dollars. The same network through which Elon Musk's companies, including Tesla Energy and Solar City, later received investment from funds tied to the Rockefeller portfolio. At the same time, political figures like Donald Trump and his business empire relied on credit lines and partnerships originating from the same post-Rockefeller banking web. The influence wasn't personal, it was structural. By the late 20th century, Rockefeller control no longer required a single oil field or corporate boardroom. It lived in systems, banks, energy conglomerates, NGOs, and think tanks that dictated global economics. Their fingerprints appear on energy policy, environmental law, and global finance. Even the shift toward green energy carries their influence. The family quietly pivoted their capital into renewable energy investment funds, rebranding themselves as environmental visionaries while still profiting from oil-directed dividends. Unlike other dynasties, the Rockefellers don't chase publicity or vanity. Their power is procedural, hidden in institutions so old and vast that they seem invisible. From the skyscrapers of Manhattan's Rockefeller Center to the balance sheets of BlackRock, the echo of Standard Oil still hums through every corner of modern capitalism. Because in the world they built, governments come and go, markets rise and fall, but the system itself remains theirs. And once you understand that, you realize the Rockefellers don't need to control Elon Musk or Donald Trump directly, because both already play on the board they designed. What do you think? Can any billionaire today truly claim independence in a world still running on Rockefeller rules? From oil barons to luxury empires and tech monopolies, these families have shaped the modern world without ever running for office. Their power doesn't scream, it whispers, through policy, markets, and men like Musk and Trump. But one dynasty stands above them all, pulling the strings across centuries. If this story of hidden control opened your eyes, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because in part 2, we'll reveal how their influence is already steering the future of AI, energy, and global power itself.